I still remember the night my husband turned our home into a stage and decided, in front of strangers and a camera, to turn me into a prop. The lights in the penthouse were too bright that evening. Ethan had insisted on the full show setting on our smart system, so every recessed light and accent lamp glowed against the glass walls, making the city look like a wallpaper behind us. Music thumped low from the hidden speakers, something with a heavy bass that made the wine glasses on the marble counter hum. I was standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows with a tray of drinks balanced on my palms. My fingers were already sticky from condensation, and I could feel a small tremor in my wrists every time someone laughed too loudly behind me. The glass was cool against my shoulder blades when I leaned back for a second, trying to catch my breath. Ethan strutted around the living room with a gimbal in his hand, his phone attached, live streaming to his followers. He wore one of his fitted black shirts and a watch that cost more than my parents' car. He kept turning his whole body to show every angle of the penthouse. "Look at this view, guys," he said, pointing the camera out toward the city. "You grind, you hustle, you make smart moves, and one day you wake up in something like this. My view, my marble, my custom art, my temple." He liked saying "my" in a way that filled the room, like it could swallow everyone else's names. His followers' comments flashed on the screen, but from where I stood, I could only see streaks of hearts and emojis. The guests, investor types in tailored jackets, women in sleek dresses, some younger influencers with camera crews of their own, followed him from room to room, nodding and laughing at his jokes, pretending this was normal. I balanced the tray and walked toward the group. The scent of expensive cologne, perfume, and champagne hit me all at once. Someone's laughter broke into a high-pitched cackle that made the back of my neck tighten. Ethan's follower, a man with flushed cheeks and a tie loosened around his neck, took a glass from my tray. "Wow, your place is insane," he said, turning to Ethan. Then he squinted at me. "Does she help you with the business, or is she just here to look pretty?" He said it like a joke, like I should giggle and play along. I felt a small sting in my chest, but I forced a smile, the one I practiced in the bathroom mirror when I didn't want to cause a scene. Before I could answer, Ethan slid an arm around my waist. His fingers dug in harder than they needed to, squeezing my side through the thin fabric of my dress. I smelled the whiskey on his breath, sharp and sweet. He said, "This one? She's just decoration. The penthouse comes with a pretty mannequin." There was a beat of silence, then a burst of laughter. Some of the men laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all night. One of the younger influencers smirked and looked at her friend. A woman across the room bit her lip, her eyes flicking toward me with something like pity. My cheeks burned so hot I thought my skin might split. The back of my throat closed up. I could feel myself smiling, the way you smile when a photographer says, "Cheese!" even if you're choking on your own spit. I looked straight into the glass wall in front of me and caught my reflection. He was right about one thing. I did look like decoration. The dress he chose hugged me like I'd been poured into it. My hair was curled and sprayed, my lips painted a color called luxury rose. I stood there silent, holding an empty tray like a waitress he'd forgotten to pay. But the mannequin in the reflection looked back at me with eyes that were not completely empty. I could see the small crease between my brows, the way my jaw was clenched. I could feel something in me tighten, then settle into a low, steady burn. I swallowed my anger and tilted the tray down so the last glass slid forward. A woman took it and gave me a small, apologetic smile. I nodded at her, setting the empty tray down on the kitchen island and wiping my palms on the side of my dress. Behind Ethan's broad shoulders, over the heads of his guests, I saw the elevator doors open with a soft ding. Rafi stepped out, half hidden by the crowd. He wore his usual dark polo with the building logo on it and held a plain manila folder in his hand. He looked around, spotted me by the windows, and lifted the folder slightly as if to say, "I've got it." His eyes were serious. That folder looks so ordinary. It could have been a maintenance report, a rental complaint, anything. But I knew what was in there. I'd requested those documents weeks ago, quietly, in an email I sent late at night when Ethan was snoring beside me. Building ownership records, association agreements. The real story behind the shiny story my husband liked to tell.
I met Rafi's gaze for half a second. Then he nodded once and stepped back toward the elevator, waiting. He was giving me time, giving me a choice. Behind me, Ethan laughed again. "This asset," he said, turning the camera back to the view. "This is my baby, my biggest win. People think they know what it takes to get here. Trust me, they don't." A little bubble of bitter amusement rose in my chest. It's funny, I thought, being called decoration in a home where only my name is on the deed. One of the guests called out, "What happens if she stops behaving, man?" That kind of stupid, drunk question men ask each other when they think women are furniture. Ethan grinned, his teeth white under the bright lights. "Then she's out," he said, casually, shrugging. "I worked for all this. I can always replace the decor." There was another ripple of laughter. The camera caught his smile, his confidence, his complete certainty that he owned every inch of the room, including me. I felt my heartbeat slow, not speed up. Slow, each thud heavy and clear. I smoothed my dress down over my hips and walked toward the elevator, pretending to be checking on the caterer. As I reached Rafi, I heard Ethan behind me say, "Let's finish the tour in the bedroom, guys. Wait till you see the closet. It's insane." I didn't turn around. I just kept walking until I was out of frame. Rafi handed me the folder. "You sure you want this tonight?" he murmured, keeping his voice low, his eyes flicking over my shoulder to the noisy crowd. "Yes," I said. My voice was calm, even to my own ears. "Tonight is perfect." He studied my face for a second. "You know what it means, right?" "I know," I said. I clutched the folder so tight the thin cardboard dug into my fingers. Let him finish his little show, Rafi. The elevator doors opened again behind us. I stepped inside, holding the folder against my chest like a shield. Tonight, I thought, as the doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of Ethan's performance, is his last tour. If you had told the girl I used to be that one day she'd be standing in a glass box in the sky, married to a man who called her a mannequin in front of strangers, she would have laughed at you. I didn't grow up in penthouses. I grew up in a narrow house with faded paint and a front yard that turned to mud every time it rained. My parents worked long hours, my dad as a mechanic, my mom at a small clinic. We counted paychecks, not views. We used to eat dinner at a wobbly table my uncle had built. The chairs creaked when we leaned back, and the air always smelled like garlic and frying onions. My mom would pinch my cheek and say, "Maya, be grateful for what you have, but don't ever forget who you are." She had a special tone when she talked about men and money. Not bitter, exactly, but very clear. "Listen," she would tell me, while we washed dishes, her hands red from the hot water, "don't depend on a man's mood to pay your bills. Love is love, but bills are bills. Always know where your money is." Back then, I'd roll my eyes and laugh. "I know, Mom," I'd say. "I'm going to be some big artist one day. I'll buy you a house." "You can be an artist, but at least know what a contract is before you sign it." I thought I was listening. I thought I understood. But there's a difference between hearing advice and feeling it in your bones. By 24, I was working at a small art gallery downtown. It wasn't glamorous. Not really. I spent a lot of time dusting frames and answering the same questions from tourists. But I loved being surrounded by paintings and sculptures, by color and texture. I loved watching people's faces when something on the wall grabbed them. That's where I met Ethan. He walked in one afternoon with two friends, laughing too loud, wearing a coat that looked like it came out of a magazine. His shoes were spotless. He had that energy some men have when they believe the world is already theirs. "Welcome," I said, smoothing my blouse, pushing a stray curl behind my ear. "Let me know if you have any questions." He didn't look at the art first. He looked at me. His eyes flicked from my face to my name tag and back. Maya, he read. Are you the artist? I laughed, a little flustered. Sometimes, I said, but not today. He grinned. Tell me about this one, he said, walking over to a large abstract painting. Swirls of blue and gold, thick strokes, chaotic, but somehow balanced. He tilted his head. I don't really get it, but I want to. So I told him. I talked about the artist's history, about the way the paint was layered, about how the piece was about feeling lost in a city and still finding your center. As I talked, Ethan watched me more than the painting. His friends got bored and went outside to smoke. Ethan stayed. Can I take you out for coffee? He asked after a while, to explain more art to me. I hesitated. I wasn't used to men like him, men with expensive watches and easy confidence asking me out. My mom's warnings fluttered in the back of my mind. But his smile was warm, and he listened when I spoke, and for once I wanted to feel like I wasn't just the girl washing paint from her hands in a tiny sink.
Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks under city lights. He took me to rooftop bars I'd only seen on Instagram. He ordered wine without looking at the price. He made everything feel bigger, faster, shinier. You have an eye, he told me one night when I was talking about how the light hit a building at sunset. That's why I like being with you. You see things other people miss. He said it in a way that made me glow. He had his own story, of course. He called himself a serial entrepreneur, which is just a fancy way of saying he'd started a lot of things and some of them had actually worked. He had a real estate media company, some investments and startups, and a growing online following where he talked about wealth building and mindset. I didn't fully understand all of it, but he had spreadsheets and presentations and clients who took him seriously. He always picked up the check. He showered me with small luxuries, flowers, rides in Uber Black cars, little gifts he said I deserved. My parents liked him at first. He came to our house with a smile and a box of pastries from a fancy bakery. He shook my father's hand firmly, complimented my mother's cooking, called our home cozy in a way that almost sounded sincere. After he left, my mom wiped the counter and raised her eyebrows at me. He's charming, she said carefully. Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. He's successful. Just remember who you are, she said. Don't let money make you stupid. I laughed. I won't, Mom. We got married faster than my parents liked. Within a year of meeting, Ethan was down on his knee in front of a hotel fountain while a friend filmed it on his phone. He posted the video online with a dramatic caption about finding your person. We moved into a sleek apartment first, not the penthouse yet. It was still nicer than anything I'd ever lived in. Big windows, a doorman, a gym in the basement. Quit the gallery, he told me one night while we were eating takeout at our new kitchen island. You don't need to work there anymore. The pay is trash, and the hours are all over the place. I want you to be able to travel with me, to help me host events, to focus on us. I frowned, pushing a piece of broccoli around my plate. I like the gallery. He said, you like art. You can still love art, but why stand on your feet for 8 hours when I'm building something that can take care of both of us? It sounded so reasonable when he said it, so loving. He painted a picture in my head, me traveling with him, helping choose locations, picking outfits, being part of this big, exciting life. It felt like stepping into one of those glossy photos I used to pin on inspiration boards. So I quit the gallery. I hugged my coworkers, took home a small plant from my desk, and walked out feeling both free and strangely empty. When I got home, Ethan had a new dress laid out on the bed, tags still on. For my wife, he said, kissing my forehead. You don't clock in for anyone anymore. At first, it was fun. We went to events, rooftops, hotel lounges. He let me choose his ties, asked my opinion on some of his thumbnails and backgrounds for videos. He called me his good luck charm, but little by little, the balance shifted. At restaurants, he grabbed the bill so fast it felt like a reflex.
If I reached for my own wallet, he laughed. Put that away. What are you going to buy? A side of fries? The first time I asked him about a joint savings account, we were at a small cafe. I'd been reading some article about married couples and finances. Do you think we should have a joint account? Like something where we both put in a portion every month? He leaned back in his chair and laughed like I'd told a joke. Maya, women and numbers don't mix, he said, shaking his head. Trust me, just let me handle the money. Rich men don't explain money to their wives, baby. That's old school. He reached over and tapped my forehead with his finger. You worry about art and making things beautiful. I'll worry about the rest. I smiled, because that's what I did. I told myself he didn't mean it. I told myself it was just a way of saying he wanted to take care of me. When we finally moved into the penthouse, he treated it like the climax of a movie he'd been filming his whole life. The first time I stepped out of the elevator and into that space, I thought I'd walked into a dream. Glass on 3 sides, the city laid out below us like a sea of lights, high ceilings that made our voices sound small, cold, smooth marble under my feet. He filmed everything. Me opening the door, me gasping at the view, me spinning around with my hands over my mouth. He made me walk down the hallway, open the bedroom door, sit on the edge of the bed like I was in an advertisement. Say something, he said, holding up his phone. I looked around and said the first thing that came to mind. It doesn't feel real, I whispered. He smiled at the camera. See, you guys, he said. You work hard, you invest right, you make smart moves, and you can put your wife in a place like this. This is what providing looks like.
He posted the video that night. His followers flooded the comments with praise. Couple goals, manifesting this. She's so lucky. My parents came to visit a week later. My mother's eyes widened when she stepped out of the elevator. Lord have mercy, she breathed, clutching her purse. You live here? My father ran his hand along the back of a white leather sofa, whistling low. You sure the floor doesn't charge rent for every step you take on it? He joked. I laughed, but their awe made me feel strange. Proud, but also exposed. Like, if they looked too closely, they might see the cracks I was already starting to notice. Ethan's mother visited soon after. She walked in like she was inspecting a hotel suite, her coat draped over her shoulders. Her eyes skimmed over the furniture, the art, and finally settled on me. You look pretty, she said in a tone that carried a fine layer of frost. Ethan always did have good taste. I said, thank you, politely. She touched the edge of our quartz countertop, nodding. You certainly got lucky, Maya, she added. Not many girls leap from little apartments to this kind of view. Something in the way she said girls made me feel 12 years old. At first, the penthouse felt like a reward. I filled it with fresh flowers. I picked out throw blankets and cushions. I learned how the light moved through the glass throughout the day, when it made the living room glow and when it turned harsh and unforgiving. I also learned how sound carried, how Ethan's voice bounced off the glass when he was on the phone, pacing, talking about deals and brand partnerships, how the laughter at his parties echoed long after everyone left. Friends stopped inviting me out as much. You're always busy, one of them said when I finally answered her call. You're either traveling with Ethan or getting ready for some event. We didn't want to bother you. I told her to bother me anyway. But when the next invitation came, Ethan had already blocked off the night for a live stream. He handed me a dress and said, I need you here. You make the place look good. At night, when he fell asleep with his phone in his hand and the blue light died on his face, I would lie on my back and scroll through his content. There I was, in the background, laughing at his jokes, holding candles, fixing pillows. I was in almost every video, but I was hardly ever the one talking. One afternoon, months before that ugly live stream tour, I tried again to bring up money. We were at the kitchen island, sunlight pouring in, making everything look clean and expensive. I was chopping vegetables for dinner. He was scrolling through his phone. I said, keeping my voice light,
Do you think maybe we should sit down and go over finances this weekend? I don't really know what we have or what we owe or anything. It makes me a little nervous. He didn't look up from his phone. We're fine, he said. I know, I said quickly. I just think. He set his phone down and leaned toward me. Maya, he said, using that tone he reserved for when he thought I was being silly. He reached out and tapped the tip of my nose with his index finger. You worry about the flowers and your Pilates classes. I'll worry about mortgages and lawyers. That's why you married me, remember? So you wouldn't have to stress about that stuff. The knife in my hand suddenly felt too heavy. I swallowed the words rising in my throat. Okay, I said softly. He smiled, satisfied, and went back to his phone. But as I went back to chopping, a little knot formed in my stomach that didn't go away. It sat there quietly for months, tightening a little more each time he changed the subject or made a joke at my expense. The first real tug on that knot came one ordinary afternoon when I went downstairs to pick up a package. The concierge, a young woman with a neat bun and kind eyes, checked the computer and slid a box across the counter. Here you go, Miss Khan, she said, using my last name. We'll let you know if anything else arrives for your unit. I paused. My unit? I repeated. She blinked, suddenly unsure. Oh, I just mean the penthouse, Unit 41. Sorry, is that wrong? No, I said quickly. It's fine. I just haven't heard anyone call it mine before. She smiled politely, not understanding. I thanked her and carried the box to the elevator, my mind buzzing louder than the elevator's hum. Your unit. It was a small phrase, a slip, maybe, but it planted a seed in my mind that refused to die. That night, as Ethan snored beside me, the city lights blinking through the glass like distant eyes, I stared at the ceiling and wondered why I had never seen a single piece of paper with both of our names on it. I thought about my mother's hands in the dishwater and her voice saying, "Know what you sign." I realized, slowly, and then all at once, that I hadn't signed anything. Not for the penthouse, not for the mortgage, nothing. I turned my head and looked at Ethan, his mouth slightly open, his fingers still resting on his phone, even in sleep. He looked so harmless in that moment, so human, so young. Not like the man who looked into a lens and told the world he owned the sky.
I slipped out of bed, picked up my own phone from the nightstand, and padded into the living room on bare feet. The marble was cold under my toes. I curled up on the end of the couch, pulled a blanket over my knees, and opened my email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. The knot in my stomach tugged again. Then I started typing an email to the building management office, asking politely, formally, for copies of any documents related to Unit 41, including ownership records and association agreements. I stared at the draft for a full minute. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Then I took a deep breath and hit send. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet email, written in the middle of the night in a penthouse that looked like it belonged in a magazine, was the first crack in the picture Ethan had painted around us. Life didn't explode right away. That's the funny thing. Sometimes the biggest changes start with nothing more than an email, and then silence. The next morning, the city still hummed below us, the coffee machine still hissed, and Ethan still walked around in his robe, scrolling his phone like he owned the sky. For a while, I almost convinced myself I had overreacted. Maybe the concierge had just misspoken. Maybe your unit was just polite language. Maybe the knot in my stomach was just me being ungrateful. But the knot stayed. A few weeks later, Ethan came into the bedroom holding a garment bag like it was a prize. He dropped it on the bed. "Big night coming up," he said, his eyes bright in that way that meant he smelled money and attention. "Creators and capital. It's going to blow up my channel. Investors, influencers, the works. We're doing it here."
In the penthouse? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Of course in the penthouse, he said, like I'd suggested holding it in a parking lot. The view is half the pitch. Open it. I unzipped the garment bag. Inside was a dress that sparkled even in the dim bedroom light. Tight, short, a kind of glittery silver that looked like it belonged on a stage, not in my life. It's, shiny, I said carefully, running my fingers over the fabric. It felt scratchy, cold. He laughed. That's the point, baby. You're the star backdrop. I need you looking perfect. People expect a certain look when they see a man at my level. A certain look. Not a partner. Not a person. A look. I swallowed. Do I have to wear this one? I asked, keeping my voice small. Could I wear the blue dress instead? The one with the sleeves? He frowned. The blue one is too serious. This is a party. Investors like to see you're already winning. Trust me, okay? I know what works on camera. That same old line. Trust me. It had carried me from a small gallery paycheck to marble floors and glass walls. It had also carried me straight out of every conversation about money. Ethan, I said, my hand still on the dress, can we talk about something before the party? He glanced at his phone. Make it quick. I've got a call in 10. I took a breath. I still don't know anything about our accounts. I don't know what we own, what we owe. Every time I want to send money to my parents, I have to ask you to bump my limit. It feels like I don't exist on paper. I think we should open a joint account, something with both our names. He stared at me for a second, then laughed. Actually laughed. Like I just told him I wanted to buy a yacht with my old gallery salary. Maya, he said, shaking his head, you are the joint asset. I blinked. What? You are the joint asset, he repeated, like he was explaining something simple to a child. He walked closer and lifted my chin with his fingers. I invested in you, your clothes, your hair, this whole life. You think I'm going to split my net worth with my own decor? The word hit me like a slap. Decor. Not wife, not partner, not even friend. Decor. I stepped back. That's not funny, I said, quietly. Oh, you're too sensitive. I'm saying you don't need to worry about it. My name's on everything. I'm handling it. Your job is to show up, look good, and not stress. There it was again. My name's on everything. He said it so easily, so often, that even I had started to believe it. Except an email was sitting somewhere in a building office waiting for someone to open it. Somewhere beneath all the marble and glass, my question was already working its way through a system of files and servers. I just don't like not knowing, I said. My voice sounded small, even to me. Then don't think about it, he snapped. Seriously, Maya, don't make tonight weird. I need you on my team, not questioning every move. He grabbed his phone and walked out of the room, already talking to someone about lighting and camera angles, leaving the glitter dress on the bed like a costume I had no choice but to wear. The night of the Creators and Capital party, the penthouse smelled like citrus cleaner and catered food. Strings of tiny lights twinkled along the balcony, and there were more bottles of champagne on the counter than I'd ever seen in one place.
I squeezed myself into the dress. The fabric scratched my skin at every step. I put on the heels he'd picked. They pinched my toes. In the mirror, I looked like one of the women from his videos. Smooth, shiny, polished. Inside, I felt like I was wearing someone else's skin. Guests started to arrive. The elevator doors slid open again and again, letting in a rush of perfume, cologne, and cold night air each time. Laughter bounced off the glass walls. Camera equipment appeared. Tripods, ring lights, a small crew with matching black t-shirts set up in the corner. Ethan moved through the room like a host and a star rolled into one. He shook hands with investors, hugged influencers, bumped fists with his videographer. Every few seconds, someone clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Man, this place is insane."
And he'd smile and say, "Yeah, this is what smart moves look like." I made sure everyone had a drink. I smoothed the cushions, adjusted candles, checked the food. Nobody had asked me to do those things. It's just what I knew how to do. I made spaces feel warm. I made people comfortable. It was the part of myself I actually liked. At one point, I came up behind Ethan and touched his arm. "Do you want anything?" I asked softly. "Just you smiling," he said, not looking at me. "You're doing good. Just remember, let me handle the talking about the serious stuff." Serious stuff? As if I weren't standing in the middle of it. Later, when the room was buzzing and the champagne had gone to people's heads, Ethan clinked his glass with a fork. "Everyone," he called out, "take a second. I want to say something." The music lowered a little. People looked up. Some of the cameras turned toward him automatically. A few phones rose into the air, already recording. He stood near the window, the whole city glowing behind him, and smiled that practiced, charming smile his followers loved. He began, "Most of you know me, Ethan, content creator, investor, guy who likes nice views and good deals." Laughter. He said, "I didn't grow up with any of this. I built it from scratch. Every apartment, every deal, every asset. And when I met Maya," he nodded toward me, "she was living in a tiny apartment barely bigger than this kitchen." People laughed again. A few eyes turned to me, looking me up and down, trying to picture me in some cramped little room. He kept going, embellishing. "She was this sweet little gallery girl, making almost nothing, but she had a good heart and a good eye. I saw her potential. I upgraded her life." The way he said upgraded made my ribs feel tight. He left out the nights we stayed up talking. He left out the way I encouraged him when deals fell through. He left out the times I helped him choose colors and layouts for his videos, the way I sat on the floor for hours matching paint samples. None of that fit the story he wanted to tell. He needed to be the hero, and I needed to be the rescued princess. That's the version of us that got him likes. At one point, a man in a navy blazer raised his hand like he was in a meeting. "Hey, Ethan," he called out, "this place is amazing, man. Are you using this as collateral for the new fund? How'd you structure the mortgage?" He looked at me, maybe trying to include me. "Do you guys plan that together?" he added, nodding toward me with a friendly smile. "She looks smart, that she's behind all this." For half a second, my heart lifted. Someone in the room thought I might be more than decor. I opened my mouth to say something simple like, "We talk about some things." But Ethan stepped in front of me, actually sliding his body between me and the question. "Please," he said, laughing and putting a hand up like a stop sign, "don't ask her about any of that. She just picks the throw pillows." The room chuckled. My face burned. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass so hard I thought it might snap. He went on, giving some vague answer about strategic leverage and smart equity, peppering his sentences with words that sounded impressive, but didn't really say anything. The man nodded, satisfied enough, and the conversation moved on. I stayed there, half hidden behind Ethan's shoulder, trying to swallow the humiliation back down. I tasted metal in my mouth. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or hit something. At one point, someone made a joke about prenups. I was standing near the kitchen now, pretending to fluff a napkin. "Come on, Ethan," a woman in a red dress said, playfully nudging him. "You must have something in writing. A man with all this," she gestured around the room, "doesn't just risk it all, right?" Ethan had been drinking steadily. I could see it in the way his smile stretched a little wider than usual, in the way his words dragged just a bit. He loved an audience even sober. A half-drunk Ethan with an audience was dangerous. He lifted his glass and raised his eyebrows. "Oh, don't worry," he said loudly. "If she ever forgets her place, she can go back to her little apartment. The penthouse is in my name, my portfolio, my rules. I'll swap her out like furniture." The laughter this time was louder, but it sounded different to me. Sharper, almost cruel. My ears rang. The room seemed to tilt just a little. My little apartment. My name, my rules. He said it with his chest, with all the confidence of a man who truly believed those words, and all I could think about, for one strange floating moment, was the email I'd sent in the dark weeks before, the one I still hadn't heard back about yet. The email sitting in some inbox with my name typed in the subject line. I realized, standing in that room full of laughter, that my question was already in motion, even if nobody here could see it. A hand brushed my arm. "You okay?" a soft voice whispered. I turned and saw a woman around my age, maybe older, with kind eyes and a frown etched between her brows. She was one of Ethan's friends' wives, I thought. We'd never really talked beyond small talk about shoes and recipes. "I'm fine," I lied. My words felt like they were coming from the end of a tunnel. Her eyes said she didn't believe me. She squeezed my arm once, then drifted away. Something in me cooled. It was like a fever breaking, but in reverse. The embarrassment didn't disappear. It hardened. It sank deeper, turned into something steadier. Something that didn't rise to the surface in tears, but settled low in my belly as anger. I watched Ethan acting out his big, generous provider story. I watched him throw my life before him like confetti, using it to impress his guests. And I knew, with a strange, quiet clarity, that whatever that email said when it finally came, I would not forget this night. Hours later, after the last guest had left and the last champagne glass was sitting half empty on the coffee table, the penthouse looked tired. Drooping balloons, lipstick marks on napkins, ice melting in buckets. My feet ached from the heels. My makeup felt heavy. My smile had cracked a long time ago. Ethan stumbled into the bedroom, unbuttoning his shirt. "Great night," he said, grinning at his reflection in the mirror. "Did you hear what David said about the deal? He's going to bring in his whole group." "I heard," I said, my voice flat. He turned toward me, finally noticing my expression. "What's with the face?" I sat on the edge of the bed, the glitter dress digging into my ribs. "Ethan," I said, "you humiliated me tonight." Oh, here we go. "I'm serious," I said. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "You told all those people you upgraded me. You said this place is in your name, your portfolio, your rules. You said you'd swap me out like furniture. It was a joke. Content. Relax." "It wasn't a joke to me," I whispered. "I am not your decor." He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You are literally standing there in a dress I bought and a house I pay for because I built this brand. And you're mad I said it out loud? I'm mad you think that's all I am. I'm mad you talk about me like I'm nothing without you, like I had no life before you." He shook his head, walking toward the dresser. "You're so sensitive, Maya. You know what? If you don't like it, go sleep in the guest room. I've got an early call." He pulled off his shirt, tossed it on the chair, and climbed into bed. Within minutes, he was snoring softly, the blue light of his phone still glowing on the nightstand. I sat there in the dark bedroom, feeling like the walls were closing in. My chest felt tight. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Something in me refused to give him that. My phone buzzed on the dresser. The sound cut through the quiet like a bell. I stood up slowly and picked it up, expecting a message from one of the guests, maybe that woman asking if I was all right. Instead, I saw a new email notification. Subject: Ownership Documents, Unit 41. The sender was the building's management office. My fingers went cold. I opened it.
The email was long and full of attached PDFs, but my eyes found the line that mattered and locked onto it. Legal owner, Maya, my full name. I read it twice, 3 times. My name, not his, mine. I scrolled down. There it was again on the scanned deed. Maya, my full name. Purchase structured under the name of Maya, my full name. Not Mr. and Mrs., not Ethan, just me. My heart pounded, but not with fear this time, with something else. Shock? Relief? A strange kind of electric power. I looked over at my husband, sleeping peacefully in the bed he thought was in his portfolio. So you're willing to lie on camera, but you never bothered to read your own paperwork? The glitter dress scratched my skin as I moved, but for the first time that night, I didn't care how it looked. I cared what was written. I cared whose name was in ink. That was the night I stopped arguing with his words and started paying attention to the paper underneath them. The weeks that followed felt like living in 2 different worlds stacked on top of each other. On the surface, nothing changed. Ethan still moved through the penthouse with that same careless confidence. He still pointed out the view in his videos and said, "This is what I bought for my family." He still used words like my house and my asset like they were part of his skin.
But under the surface, inside me, things were shifting. First, he tightened his grip. It started with a phone call from my mother. She sounded tired. I could hear pots clinking in the background, the little TV playing softly in their kitchen. "Sweetheart," she said, "you don't have to, but if you could help a little this month, the clinic cut my hours, just until things settle." "Of course," I said immediately. "I'll transfer something today." After we hung up, I went to my banking app. I wasn't on the main accounts. Ethan never let me see those. But I had a card he funded with a monthly allowance. I set up a transfer to my parents' account, just a modest amount. Nothing that would even make a dent in what Ethan spent on one watch. I thought nothing of it. I pressed confirm and went about my day, wiping down the counters and lighting a candle that smelled like vanilla and cedar. An hour later, my phone buzzed. The transfer had been declined. I frowned, went to find Ethan. He was in his office, a sleek little room off the hallway with dark walls and a big screen on the wall full of graphs. "Hey," I said softly, knocking on the doorframe. "Do you know why my transfer didn't go through? I was just sending my mom a little help." He didn't look up. "Yeah, I saw that," he said. "I canceled it." I blinked. "You... what?" He finally turned his chair towards me. "Maya, you can't just move money behind my back." "It's my card," I said. "You load it, but it's my money," he snapped, standing up. "Do you have any idea what my cash flow looks like this month?" "No, you don't. Because I'm the one juggling investors and deals while you pick out candles. You don't just give away thousands because your mom has a bad week. It wasn't thousands. It was a few hundred. And she's my mother." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This is exactly why I keep the big picture away from you. You're emotional. You think in helping and feelings. I think in numbers. You want to help your parents? Ask me first. Don't go sneaking around." I felt like a child being scolded for taking cookies, except the cookies were my aging parents' medical bills. "I wasn't sneaking," I said. "I was trying to help my family. Am I allowed to do that?" "You're allowed to do what we plan together, not run off and play charity with my accounts. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't have access at all." He turned back to his screen, effectively dismissing me. I walked out of the office in a daze. That was the first time it really hit me how weak my position was day to day. My name might be on the deed, but his hands were on the wallet. The second tightening came wrapped in excuses about budgeting. He started sending me screenshots of my spending, groceries, candles, a new set of sheets I'd ordered online when the old ones got threadbare. One text read, Do you really need organic berries? You know they mark that stuff up because people like you don't check prices. Another. 2 candles in 1 month, Maya? What are we, a church? Meanwhile, boxes with his new tech and watches arrived at the front desk regularly. He bought a new camera lens that cost more than the monthly rent on my parents' house. When I raised an eyebrow, he shrugged. That's an investment. It pays off. The candles don't. Slowly, he lowered the limits on my card. A payment would decline at the grocery store. A rideshare app wouldn't go through. I'd have to step aside, cheeks burning, and call him to ask him to unlock it. Just text me before you spend, he'd say. It's not that hard. Our home became his favorite backdrop. He started filming more morning routine videos. Me pouring coffee, me straightening pillows, me kissing him before he sat down to crush the day. I didn't want to be in them after that party night. I told him so. I don't like being on camera so much. After what you said at the party, it feels weird. He smiled at me, but his eyes were flat. You like this life, don't you? This view, these floors, the clothes? Then you need to stop overthinking and play your part. People love us as a couple. They love seeing you. It makes the brand feel human. So I stood there, holding a mug, pretending not to notice the comments. She's so lucky. She landed a king. Imagine going from a tiny apartment to that view. She better never complain. At night, when he fell asleep, I would read those comments and feel the walls push in a little tighter. The threats got more direct. One evening, I tried again to talk to him about finances. I picked a calm moment when he was pouring himself a drink in the kitchen, the city dark outside. Ethan, I began, can we please sit down and go over our accounts? I don't feel safe not knowing anything. What if something happens to you? What if something happens to us? He slammed the bottle down and a little harder than necessary. Why are you obsessed with this? He snapped. Do you not trust me? It's not about trust, I said quietly. It's about security. It's about me not feeling like I'd be homeless if you got sick, or if we...
He laughed, a harsh sound. If you can't trust me, you can leave, he said. But you're not taking a cent of my money or this place. I'll make sure of it. I've got lawyers. You think I'd let some pity project ruin everything I built? The words, this place, hung in the air between us. My mind flashed back to that line on the deed. Legal owner, Maya, my full name. He didn't even know he was threatening to take something that wasn't his. He started making jokes about renovating me out. He'd stand in the living room, looking around with that appraising gaze of his and say, you know, one day I might upgrade the decor, get a newer model. This place deserves it. If I frowned, he'd say, relax, I'm joking. But there was always a tiny, mean light in his eyes when he said it. When his mother came over, she loved to join in. One afternoon, she stood in the kitchen with a glass of white wine, watching me chop vegetables. You don't need to worry your pretty head about these things, she said, waving her hand dismissively when I mentioned a bill. Decoration doesn't need a degree in finances. Leave all that stress to the men. Ethan laughed, walking by. See, it's not just me saying it. Listen to Mom. That night, when we were in bed, he ran a hand over my hip and said, you really are my penthouse art, you know that. Perfect lines, perfect light. I did good with you. I stared up at the ceiling in the dark and felt something in me step back. Not physically, but inside. Like I was moving away from him in my mind even while lying next to him. The penthouse, with its endless windows and shining floors, started to feel less like a home and more like a gilded cage. Every corner smelled like his cologne. Every room carried echoes of his voice making speeches. One night, unable to sleep, I grabbed my phone and opened a new note. I titled it simply, What He Says. I started to write down his worst comments, the dates, the context.
called me decor at Creators and Capital Party, threatened to throw me out if I asked about money again, canceled transfer to mom, accused me of sneaking. Line by line, I built a quiet record, only one I could see. I started taking screenshots of his text messages when he insulted me. When he wrote, "You'd be back in your tiny life without me," I clipped it and saved it to a private folder. When he left bank envelopes open on the counter, I snapped a quick photo before putting them away. I didn't even fully understand the numbers yet, but I knew enough to feel the weight of words like overdue and restructuring. I realized I couldn't just keep telling him I was hurt and then swallowing it when he laughed. I needed something more solid, something that didn't care whether he thought it was just content. So I set up a coffee with Rafi. On the surface, it was nothing, just a cousin catching up. That's how I worded it in the text. "Hey, it's been a while. Coffee sometime?" We met at a small cafe on the corner, the kind of place with chipped mugs and a pastry case that always looked half empty. It smelled like espresso and sugar. Rafi sat down across from me, his building ID badge clipped to his pocket. He looked tired in the way people who work in customer service often do, like he'd spent the day smiling at people who didn't see him. "You look fancy," he said with a small smile, glancing at my coat. "Penthouse life suit ya?" I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "Depends which angle you take the picture from," I said. We talked about family first, our aunt's health, his little sister's exams, normal things. I watched the steam curl up from my cup and tried to find the courage to say what I really came there to say. Finally, I took a breath. "Ruffy," I said, "can I ask you something? As the building manager, not just my cousin?" He straightened up a little. "Okay," he said. "What's up?" I stared at the table. "Who actually owns my unit on paper?" He frowned. "You mean the penthouse?" "Yeah, you do. I mean, he stopped, realizing I wouldn't be asking if I knew. "I haven't seen anything," I said quickly. "No contracts, no mortgage documents. Ethan handles all of it. But people keep saying things, and I need to hear it from someone who sees the actual files." Rafi studied my face. The air between us got heavy. "Has he been—" He started, then stopped himself. "Look, I can't share other tenants' information, but your unit paperwork? You're allowed to see that. I'll pull what I can, and you can come by my office. We'll go through it together, okay?" Relief washed over me so fast my eyes stung. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm not trying to start drama. I just need to know where I stand." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he said, "the only way to know if something is yours is to look at who signed it." I walked back to the building feeling both calmer and more scared. Every time the elevator dinged, my stomach twisted. Was I making something out of nothing, or was I about to find out my whole life was balanced on top of a lie? As I stepped out into the lobby, I saw Ethan leaning against the wall, talking to his mother. She glanced at me, her lips tightening. "There's my little decoration," she said. "How's the gallery girl enjoying the palace?" Ethan chuckled, and that night in bed, he referred to me as Penthouse Art again, like it was a pet name. I lay there in the dark, my mind spinning. I thought about my mother's voice telling me not to hand my security to anyone. I thought about the line on that deed. I thought about the email from management and the coffee with Rafi. I realized I had a choice. I could keep playing the role he wrote for me, smiling on camera, taking the jokes, letting him tighten every financial rope around my throat, or I could quietly start building something else. Not a dramatic scene, not a big blow-up, a plan. So that's what I did. I started tracking his filming schedule, the times he was out meeting investors, the nights he stayed late in his office making calls. I noted his moods, when he was drunk and loose, when he was alert and sharp. And at 3 a.m, when the city lights blinked below us like tired eyes, I lay on the couch with my phone and started looking up family lawyers. I didn't know then whose name I would find on those contracts with Ethan, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting him tell the story alone. That night on the couch, with the glow of my phone on my face and the city winking outside those glass walls, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not yet, but a kind of quiet decision. I was tired of feeling like a guest in my own life. I was tired of hearing his version of the story on every screen while my version stayed locked inside my chest. So I started looking up lawyers. I didn't even know what to search at first. I typed family lawyer, then property lawyer, then women, divorce, house, deed. Pages and pages came up. Some had cold corporate pictures. Others had smiling faces that felt fake. I scrolled until my eyes burned. Finally, I found a website that felt steady. No flashy promises, just clear words about marital property, separate property, financial abuse. There was a small picture of a woman in her 40s with calm eyes. Her name was Christina. I bookmarked the page, locked my phone, and lay there listening to Ethan snore through the bedroom wall. I didn't call her yet. I wasn't ready for that step. But just knowing her name was there, sitting quietly in my bookmarks, made the knot in my stomach loosen a little. A few days later, my phone buzzed with another name that still meant safety to me. Rafi. "Hey, cuz," his text said. "Got something for you. Can you come down to my office around 3? My thumbs hovered over the screen. My first instinct was to ask Ethan, out of habit, "Do we have plans? Are you home at 3? Then I stopped myself. I didn't owe him a report for every step I took in the building my name was on. "Sure," I wrote back to Rafi. His office was in the back corridors of the building behind a locked door that smelled faintly of dust and cleaning supplies. No marble, no art, no floor-to-ceiling windows. Just beige walls, fluorescent lights, and a small desk with a computer. The contrast between that cramped little room and my glass palace upstairs made my stomach twist. It was like walking from a movie set into the storage closet. Rafi stood when I walked in. He looked more serious than usual. On his desk sat a thick folder, the cheap cardboard kind with metal prongs in the middle. "Close the door," he said quietly. I did. The click sounded louder than it should have. "Okay," he sighed, sitting back down. "I pulled everything related to your unit that I'm allowed to show you. Ownership, association, some recent communications. You ready?" "No," I said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." He opened the folder. The paper smelled like toner and old air. He slid a few pages toward me. "Here," he said, tapping the top sheet. It was a copy of the deed. Not the little summary line I'd seen in that email, but the full document. Names, numbers, legal language. I scanned the lines until I saw it again. Owner of record, Maya. My full name. No Aunt Ethan, no joint tenancy, no split. Mine. "Wait," I whispered, my eyes jumping back and forth. "There's no... Are you sure this is right? This can't be right." "It is," Rafi said. "See this section here?" He pointed to a paragraph full of legal words. "This place was bought using funds from the family trust, your late uncle's investment with Ethan's startup. They structured it so the unit would be held under your name to protect the family's money. If Ethan's business tanked, they didn't want this asset tangled up in his debts." I blinked. I remembered those months vaguely. My uncle getting sick, Ethan flying out to meet him, the two of them talking in low voices in our old apartment's kitchen. I'd heard words like deal and equity and trusted structure. I assumed it was all about Ethan's company. He told me, I said slowly, that my uncle just believed in his business, that he was investing in him. "He did," Rafi answered, "but he also believed in you, and he was smart enough to put something in your name."
A lump formed in my throat. I hadn't cried when Ethan called me decor. I hadn't cried when he canceled my transfer to my mother. But sitting in that ugly little office, looking at my name in black ink, I felt tears prick my eyes. "I didn't know," I whispered. "Rafi, I had no idea." He hesitated, then flipped to another set of pages. "There's more," he said. "And this part, you're not going to like." He showed me printouts of emails. They were between the building's association and an outside bank. The subject lines made my skin crawl. Penthouse unit, equity line proposal. Appraisal request, owner consent pending. Draft agreement attached. On one of the forms at the bottom, there was a box labeled owner signature. Beside it, another box, agent or spouse if applicable. The agent line had Ethan's name typed neatly. A digital signature scribble was already there. The owner's signature line was blank. "That's you," Rafi said, pointing at the empty space. "They can't do anything without your consent here. They need your actual signature. That's why these are stalled." My fingers trembled as I traced the edge of the page. "He's been trying to... what?" I asked. "Sell it? Borrow against it?" "Looks like both," Rafi answered. "First, he talked to a bank about refinancing. Then there was an inquiry from a realtor, a high-end one. They asked for access for a discreet showing and details about your HOA fees, all in the same week." I remembered that week. Ethan had been even more wired than usual. More late-night calls, more big talk about expansion. I thought he was just excited about some new content deal. Why would he... I swallowed. Why would he risk our home like that? Rafi gave me a look that said he could think of plenty of reasons, none of them good. "Between you and me," he said, lowering his voice, "I've seen some not great notes on his other holdings. Overdue association fees on those smaller units, a couple of foreclosure warnings in other buildings. He juggles a lot. Sometimes people like that start treating anything they can touch as something they can trade." I felt like I was going to be sick. "All this time," I whispered, "he's been threatening to throw me out of his house, saying it's his asset, his portfolio, his rules, and he's been trying to use something that isn't even his to fix the messes he made." "Legally, he has zero authority to sell or refinance this unit without you. On paper, he's nobody here, just a resident with access. That's why they keep asking for the owner's consent. That's why these drafts are stuck." My mind flashed back to his voice at that party. "The penthouse is in my name, my portfolio, my rules. I'll swap her out like furniture." The room's spinning. The laughter. The burn in my cheeks. He really believed his words could overwrite the ink on those files. A strange feeling rose up in me then. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't simple relief. It was heavier than that. It carried fear, too, because I suddenly understood how close I had been to being pulled into his debts. One signature at the wrong time, one moment of, "just sign here, babe," and I could have been tied to his bad deals for years. But right alongside the fear was something else, a quiet, deep power. Every "my house, my rules" speech started to sound different in my memory. It sounded smaller. "So, right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "he's been bragging to investors about using this as collateral? He's been promising things he legally can't deliver?" "Yes," Rafi said, "and banks don't like that." He closed the folder, watching me carefully. "Maya, if he tries anything shady, fake signatures, unauthorized access, bringing people up here to show the place without your knowledge, the building does have protocols. Cameras in the hallways, logs. We can flag his account. Quietly. No drama unless we need it." My throat felt tight. "Can you do that?" I asked. "Flag it? If you say so," he replied. "You're the owner. You give the instructions." Owner. The word hit me in a new way. Not like a dream, not like one of his captions, like a fact. "I want it flagged," I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded firm. "If anything comes through about this unit and my signature is on it without me being there in person, I want someone to call me immediately." He nodded. "Done." I stood up on shaky legs. The fluorescent light hummed above us.
Somewhere in another part of the building, an elevator dinged. As I walked out of that little office with the cheap carpet, the air in the hallway felt different. The building didn't seem so vast and intimidating anymore. The walls felt less like they were pressing in, and more like they were holding something I had a claim to. By the time I reached the private elevator that led up to the penthouse, my heart had stopped racing. My palms were still damp, but my steps were steadier. When the doors opened and I walked back into the glass box in the sky, the light hit me in the face. The same windows, the same floors, the same furniture were all there, but they looked sharper, less like treasures Ethan had handed me, and more like objects sitting in a space that was legally mine. Ethan was on the phone in the living room, pacing back and forth, his voice animated.
Yeah, once we unlock the equity in this place, he was saying, gesturing out toward the view, everything else falls into place. It's my crown jewel. People will line up just to be in the room. Trust me, the bank is on board. We're just waiting on a little formality. I stood in the kitchen, out of his direct line of sight, and watched him talk about unlocking equity in a place he had never bothered to read the title for. For the first time, instead of shrinking under his big words, I just stared and thought, you really don't know, do you? Later that night, he mentioned big moves coming with the penthouse to someone on speakerphone, using that voice he loved to use, the one that made everything sound like a done deal. I poured myself tea slowly, the steam rising in front of my face, and listened from the other side of the counter. Yeah, he said, laughing, this place is my safety net, my get-out-of-jail-free card. Worst case, I just refinance it again. It can carry the next project. He had no idea that down in a beige office, as he bragged, his safety net had just been quietly tagged with a note in the system, owner must be contacted directly for all transactions, possible unauthorized attempts by spouse. I lifted the cup to my lips and took a slow sip. Go ahead and sell what you don't own, I thought. I'll be ready when your buyers ask for the real signature. Knowing the truth is one thing, doing something with it is another. The next step scared me even more because it meant putting everything into real words with a stranger who could not be charmed by Ethan's smile. I pulled up Christina's website again one afternoon while Ethan was at a gym shoot. The photo of her hadn't changed. Calm eyes, no nonsense. There was a little button that said, schedule a consultation. My finger hovered over it. My heart thudded in my chest. Once I clicked, it wouldn't just be me and my notes and my late-night thoughts anymore. It would be official. My doubts spoken out loud to someone who could actually act on them. I clicked. I picked a weekday morning. In the little description box, I typed, married, husband real estate/influencer, deed of home in my name, concerned about finances and threats, need to understand my rights. When the confirmation email came, I stared at it for a long time. The appointment time looked like a countdown, not just a date. To Ethan, I said, I booked a spa day. I need a massage. My back is killing me from all your parties. He grinned, not looking up from his phone. He said, good. He said, you've been tense. Go relax. Put it on the card. I had already decided I wouldn't put it on his card. On the day of the appointment, I dressed in simple clothes. Jeans, a soft sweater, nothing flashy. I looked at myself in the bedroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like she was about to go into battle, but the army was made of paper and signatures instead of weapons. I told Ethan I might stop and get my nails done too. He waved me away, already rehearsing a pitch out loud to his reflection. The law office lobby smelled of coffee and printer ink. The chairs were simple. No gold accents, no fountains. A receptionist smiled at me and asked me to fill out a form. My hands shook as I wrote my name, my address, marital status, married. When Christina came out to meet me, she looked exactly like her picture. Dark hair pulled back, glasses, an expression that said she had seen many women walk into this office half terrified and half determined. She said, Maya? I said, yes. She shook my hand. Her grip was firm and dry.
She said, "Come on back. Let's talk." Her office had bookshelves full of thick volumes, a framed certificate on the wall, a plant in the corner with leaves that drooped a little like it was tired but still holding on. I sat down in the chair across from her desk and set my bag on my lap. The copies of the deed and the emails felt heavy inside. She said, "So," she said gently, folding her hands, "tell me why you're here." The words tumbled out of me in pieces at first. The party, the decoration comments, the threats, the canceled transfer to my mother, the card limits, the fact that my name was on the deed and he didn't know, the attempts to refinance, the way he talked about throwing me out of his house. I watched her expression carefully for signs of disbelief or judgment. They never came. She just nodded sometimes, wrote notes, asked a few simple questions. "Has he ever hit you?" she asked at one point. "No," I said. "He doesn't have to. He uses money and words." She nodded. "That counts." When I finished, my throat hurt. My eyes were wet. I didn't mean to cry, but the tears had pushed their way out somewhere around the part where I talked about him threatening to make sure I left with nothing. "I still remember him when he was kind," I whispered, "when he came into the gallery and actually listened to me. Sometimes I think maybe I'm crazy, maybe he's right, and I'm just ungrateful. Other times I feel like if I don't do something now, I'll wake up one day with my name on a mountain of debt I never agreed to." Christina slid a box of tissues across the desk. She said, "You're not crazy. You're waking up."
She then turned the conversation from feelings to facts. "Legally," she said, "that penthouse is your separate property. It was bought in your name, using funds that can be traced to your family's trust. That gives you a lot of protection if you choose to separate or divorce. It also gives you leverage right now while you're still in the marriage. We talked about scenarios. If I filed for divorce, if I didn't, if he tried to forge my signature, if he tried to scare me by cutting off money, if he made good on his threats to make sure I left with nothing. You've already taken important steps," she said, when I told her about the notes on my phone and the screenshots. "Document what you can, when you can, without putting yourself in danger. Don't confront him with it yet. Keep your knowledge as your power." She suggested practical moves, opening my own bank account at a different bank, directing any freelance income or birthday checks for my parents there, making sure my important documents were copied and stored safely, not just in drawers he could rifle through. She also drafted a formal notice to the building association on her computer while I sat there, my heart thudding. It stated in clear legal language that I, as the sole owner, did not consent to any refinancing, sale, or collateralization of the unit. Any attempts without my explicit written approval should be considered unauthorized and possibly fraudulent. "We'll send this after you sign," she said. "It gives them a framework to act if your husband keeps trying to push deals through. It protects you and, frankly, the building and the bank as well." I stared at the draft on her screen. It was strange, seeing my life summarized in such precise, bloodless words. Owner, spouse, unauthorized use. But those words were on my side if I used them. At one point, the emotion broke through all the legal talk. I leaned back in the chair, covering my face with my hands. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice muffled. "I'm scared of being alone. I'm scared of him exploding if he finds out I came here. I'm scared of people online calling me a gold digger if any of this gets out. He's very good at telling a story where he's the hero." Christina let the silence sit for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Fear is normal. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the next steps matter. But you're not helpless. You're not a prop in his story unless you stay where he puts you." I took my hands away from my face and nodded. I wiped my eyes and signed the notice to the building with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. When we finished, I tucked the copies of everything into my bag. Christina walked me to the door. "If you decide to file," she said, "call me. If you don't, but you need advice, call me. If he escalates, call me. You're not alone in this." The sunlight outside the office felt too bright.
For a second, I had to close my eyes and breathe. I almost laughed when I thought about the story I told Ethan that morning. He thought I was lying on a massage table somewhere with cucumbers on my eyes. In a way, I had done something even more relaxing. I had finally laid some of my anxiety on a different kind of table and let someone else help me carry it. Of course, the universe couldn't let me enjoy that little bit of calm for long. The next day, Ethan walked into the living room while I was rearranging books on the coffee table. "You've been out a lot lately. Everything okay? You cheating on me with Pilates?" He laughed at his own joke. I smiled thinly. "I just needed some space," I said. "I've been doing some classes, meeting a friend for coffee." He walked over, grabbed my phone off the table before I could stop him, and started scrolling through my lock screen. "Ethan!" I said sharply, reaching for it. He danced away like a child playing keep away. "Relax. What's the big secret? Let me see your calendar. I pay for everything you do, remember?" My heart pounded. The emails from Christina and the building were tucked away behind my password, but my calendar app did have the word appointment marked on that morning. No details, just that word. He squinted at it. "Spa?" he asked. "Yes," I lied quickly. Before he could tap deeper into the event, his phone dinged on the counter with a loud notification. A familiar investor name flashed across his screen. He tossed my phone back to me like it was suddenly boring. "Hold that thought," he said, already reaching for his own screen. "This could be big." As he walked away, talking loud and fast, my hands shook. It had been too close. One more curious swipe and he could have seen more than I was ready to explain. That near discovery lit another small fire under me. I realized I couldn't keep everything tied to him. Not my money, not my access, not my identity. So, I opened a bank account of my own. I went in person, wearing simple clothes and no rings. The bank smelled like paper and coffee. I sat across from a young man in a suit and told him I wanted an individual account just in my name.
"Any joint accounts with a spouse?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "but this one is just mine." He nodded like it was no big deal. For him, it was paperwork. For me, it felt like carving out a little pocket of air inside a house that had been closing in on me. I started taking on small freelance design work again, quietly. Mood boards for people redoing their living rooms, digital sketches, suggestions for wall colors and layouts, little things that came easy to me. I did it through a separate email. I had payments sent to my new account. It wasn't a fortune, but each time I saw even a modest deposit come in with only my name attached, I felt a bit more like myself again. The girl from the gallery who knew how to see a space and make it speak. With Rafi's help, I tightened things on the building side too. I asked him for extra key cards in my name only, not Ethan and Maya, just Maya. Cards that could be deactivated if I said so. We set up my own separate login to the building portal, independent from the shared email Ethan used for deliveries and guest passes. We changed the notification settings so that any note about ownership, fees, or structural changes went directly to my private email, the one Ethan never checked. If an elevator inspection failed, I knew. If a bank wrote to the association again about our unit, I knew, not him. One afternoon, as I was coming back from the grocery store, I saw Ethan at the far end of the lobby talking to someone. I ducked behind a column and realized it was Rafi. Even from a distance, I could see the irritation in Ethan's hands. He gestured sharply toward the ceiling, no doubt talking about his asset again. "Why is the bank dragging its feet?" I heard him say. "I signed everything on my end. We should be good to go." Rafi's face was neutral. "Sometimes," he said, voice steady, "paperwork just takes time. And like I told you, Ethan, any changes on that unit have to go through the owner." "I am the owner," Ethan snapped. Rafi paused just long enough for the words to hang there. "On paper, no," he said quietly. "You're a resident,
The owner of record is your wife. I watched Ethan's jaw tighten. Well, she's not going to be difficult, trust me. Rafi just shrugged. That's between you two, but the system is what it is. We can't override it. He caught my eye over Ethan's shoulder then for a half a second, and there was a question in his gaze. Are you okay? Are we still doing this? I gave him a small nod and kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard anything. That close call in the lobby showed me something important. If Ethan started to feel his grip slipping, he could get meaner than that. I had to be ready for that. At home, I kept recording his worst comments. When he paced the living room ranting, "I own everything in this house," I would set my phone face down on the counter with the voice memo running. When he told me, "If you ever walk out that door, you're leaving with the clothes on your back and nothing else," I pressed the little red button and let it capture every word. It felt dirty, like I was doing something wrong. But then I would remember him on live streams using my life as his content, telling stories about upgrading me, and the guilt would fade. The emotional tension inside the penthouse kept building quietly, like steam. You wouldn't see it in our photos, but I could feel it every time I heard the elevator ding. One weekend, my mother came to visit. She walked in carrying a bag of homemade food, as if the penthouse didn't have top-of-the-line appliances and access to any restaurant we wanted. She said, "I made your favorite." She lifted the lid of a casserole dish in my kitchen. The smell of baked pasta and cheese filled the air, wrapping around me with memories of our old house. We sat at the kitchen island, the same place Ethan liked to wave his hands and talk about mortgages. And she looked at me closely as I picked at my plate. "You're skinnier," she said. "Is everything all right?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just busy." She reached over and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was rougher than mine. "You sure you're happy?" she asked softly. "I know big houses come with big shadows sometimes." For a moment, the truth rose up into my throat. I opened my mouth to tell her everything. About the deed, about the threats, about the lawyer, about the way I felt like I lived with a stranger who used my face as decoration. Then I pictured her going home to my father with a heavy heart. I pictured her lying awake worrying about me instead of resting her back. I pictured Ethan's anger if he caught wind of our conversation. So I swallowed it. "I'm okay, Mom," I said. "I'm figuring things out, I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she squeezed my hand and let it go. That night, after she left, I stood on the balcony with the cold railing under my palms. The city stretched out below, full of people living lives I would never see. If I was going to tear open the pretty picture Ethan had painted online, I realized I had to do it in a way that didn't drag my parents through the mud with us. I had to make sure his story broke around him, not around them.
So when he came home one evening, excited and full of plans, talking about a brand relaunch party, I listened very carefully. "It's gonna be huge," he said, uncovering leftovers and eating straight from the container. "We'll reintroduce the Penthouse as the official headquarters of the new fund. Investors, bank reps, influencers, even some of the old clients. Cameras everywhere. It'll be like that first move-in video, but bigger." He grinned. "We'll call it the Penthouse Relaunch. I want the whole world to see how far we've come." "We," I repeated quietly. "Of course," he said, kissing my forehead in passing. "You'll be there, making everything look perfect like you do. People love seeing you in the background." He had no idea that in my mind, something clicked into place. That party would bring everyone who believed his version of the story into one room. The investors who thought this place was in his portfolio, the bank representative who was just waiting on a formality. The same kind of people he'd bragged to before, except this time I'd have more than hurt feelings. I'd have proof. That night, I sent Christina an email. "He is planning a big event in the Penthouse with investors and a bank rep. Can we talk about timing?" She wrote back, "Call me tomorrow. This sounds like an opportunity."
In the weeks leading up to the party, the three of us, me, Christina, and Rafi, moved quietly in the background of Ethan's big plans. Christina prepared legal notices that were ready to be sent the minute we needed them. One to the bank, highlighting the ownership and warning them about misrepresentation. One to the building, confirming that any attempt to use the unit as collateral without my written consent would be challenged. We stored digital copies of everything important in a secure cloud folder only she and I could access. Deeds, emails, screenshots, notes about his threats. I printed a neat packet with his full name on the front, containing the deed with my name highlighted and the correspondence about the refinance attempts. Don't wave it around, Christina advised. Have it ready. Let his own words lead us into it. Rafi made sure the hallway cameras were working properly and that their footage would be easy to pull if needed. He quietly briefed building security that there might be a situation on the night of the party, that they should be ready to respond to me, not just to Ethan. They think of him as the big shot up there, he said, with a little smile on his lips. It'll be good for them to remember whose name they actually see on the owner line. Inside the penthouse, the stage for Ethan's grand relaunch slowly took shape. He ordered new flowers, new glasses, hired a bartender, a caterer, a small string quartet for the early part of the evening. He rehearsed speeches in front of the mirror, using words like legacy, vision, ownership. One afternoon, I watched him from the hallway as he practiced. The city was bright behind him. His reflection in the glass looked powerful, confident. He pointed at himself as he said, "This house is the proof that I make things happen. This house is my guarantee." He caught me watching and winked. "Don't forget to book your hair and makeup. I need my decorations sparkling that night." Decoration. That old wound didn't sting the same way anymore. Not now that I knew where the real power sat. The day before the party, the penthouse was empty except for me. The caterers would arrive later, the rental company tomorrow morning. For a few hours, it was just me and the echo of my footsteps on the marble. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around slowly. The glass walls, the view, the furniture, the art. It all felt like a showroom, waiting for customers. I took a deep breath and started arranging flowers. I always did that before his events. Ethan liked fresh flowers in the shots, but this time, I wasn't thinking about how his followers would see them. I was thinking about where people would stand, where the bank rep would be, where the investors would gather, where I would step forward. I placed a vase on the side table where I planned to quietly set down the folder with the deed. I chose a spot where the cameras would see me clearly, but where I could reach the papers without fumbling. As I smoothed the petals of a white lily, I realized I wasn't just decorating a space for his show. I was setting the stage to take his script away. The night of the party came faster than I expected. By early evening, the penthouse buzzed with activity. The caterers moved like a small army, laying out canapes that smelled like truffle and garlic. The string quartet tuned their instruments in a corner. Glasses clinked, the AC hummed softly, keeping the room at the perfect cool temperature. I wore a dress I had chosen myself this time. It was simple, dark, elegant, not glittery, not too tight. Something I could stand and breathe in, something that made me feel like a person, not a prop. Ethan, on the other hand, looked like he was about to host an awards show. Perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect smile. "Babe, you look amazing," he said, giving me a quick once-over. For a second, he sounded like the man from the gallery again. "See, when you trust my events, everything comes together."
I smiled just enough to keep the peace. Guests started to arrive. Investors in pressed suits, influencers with their own cameras, couples from his industry. His mother, wrapped in a designer shawl, her lips already pursed. The music floated above the chatter. The city lights spun outside the glass like another layer of decoration. Phones were out from the moment people stepped off the elevator. Everything was recorded. Laughter, toasts, the way the light hit the crystal chandeliers. Ethan thrived in it. He moved from group to group, charming everyone, his hand occasionally finding my waist or my shoulder to steer me into a shot. At one point, he pulled me close in front of a small cluster of investors. "And here she is," he said, kissing my temple for the camera. "My queen. She makes this house a home." Under his breath, with a smile still on his face, he added,
Just smile. This is important. I smiled. But inside, my heart was pounding for a different reason. Toward the middle of the evening, a woman from the bank arrived. She wore a navy blazer and sensible heels. She had a man with her carrying a slim briefcase. Ethan lit up when he saw them. "Everyone!" he called out, clinking his glass lightly. "Our partners from the bank are here. This is the team that believes in what we're building." They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, looked around the penthouse with practiced eyes. I watched the woman's gaze linger on the view, the ceilings, the overall shine. Once the room had settled a bit, Ethan raised his glass higher. "Can I have your attention for a moment?" he asked. The music lowered. Conversations died down. Phones lifted again, little red recording lights appearing around the room like tiny eyes. He stood where the window, backlit by the city, just like at the other party. It was his favorite spot for speeches. "Most of you know my story," he began. "I didn't come from this. I came from nothing. No connections, no generational wealth, just grit, smart moves, and the belief that if you see an opening, you take it." Heads nodded. A few people murmured, "That's right." "When I first walked into this building," he gestured around, "I was a guy renting a one-bedroom and dreaming of the top floor. I told myself, one day that penthouse will be mine. And now," he smiled, spreading his arms, "you're standing in the crown jewel of my portfolio." The words rolled over me like cold water. Different night, same lie. He went on about ownership, assets, leveraging what you have to build more. He talked about using this house as proof to partners and banks that he was reliable, that he could handle big deals. Finally, the bank representative spoke up. She raised her glass slightly. "We've been very impressed, and we're excited to finalize once all ownership signatures are confirmed." All eyes turned back to Ethan. He laughed lightly, waving his hand. "Oh, that's just a formality. You know how paperwork is. We live here. We built this. The signatures are just ink." Ink. He had no idea how much I'd been thinking about ink. My heart was pounding, my palms were damp, but my mind was strangely clear. I saw the path in front of me like stepping stones. This was my cue. I took a breath and stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice calm, but carrying enough to cut through the room. The room shifted. Conversations died completely. Cameras and phones pivoted toward me, the way they had so often toward him. He turned, surprise flashing across his face before he covered it with a smile. "Babe, we're good. Don't worry the grown-ups with the fine print." "I'm not worried. I just want to make sure we're all looking at the same picture." Someone handed me a microphone. I didn't even see who. My fingers closed around it. The metal felt cool and solid. I moved to stand beside Ethan, near the window. For years, I had stood slightly behind him in this spot. That night, I made sure my feet were planted firmly beside his. "I live here too," I began, looking at the bank representative. "My name is on all the mail, on the delivery receipts, on the association notices. You'd think I'd be used to hearing it connected to this address." I glanced at Ethan with a small smile. "But I'm not. Because in almost every story he tells, it's my house, my rules, my asset, my investment. If you've watched his content, you've heard the phrases." A few people chuckled nervously. They had heard them, many times. I continued. "He loves to joke that I'm just decoration, that I pick the throw pillows, that I'm the mannequin that came with the penthouse." A low murmur ran through the crowd. Some women exchanged glances, remembering those moments in his videos. A couple of men shifted uncomfortably. I used to laugh, even when it stung, because I thought that was the price of this life. Being grateful, being quiet, letting him tell the story because he was the one who brought me up from my little life. I turned my head slightly, letting my gaze sweep the room, then the windows, then back to the representative. But recently, I started reading the paperwork he never bothered to look at. My voice was still calm. If someone had closed their eyes, they might have thought I was telling a bedtime story. Inside, my heart felt like a drum.
On paper, I said, this penthouse, the one in all these videos, the one in the fundraising materials, the one he calls the crown jewel of his portfolio, isn't his asset. It's mine. A beat of silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. I continued before anyone could cut in. The deed, I said, is in my name. Only mine. It was structured that way years ago, when my late uncle put money into his startup and insisted that one asset be held under my name to protect our family's investment. Every time he says, my house, my rules, what he really means is my wife's house, her name on the deed, my ego on the internet. A few people actually laughed at that, shocked. The sound tinged with disbelief. His mother's face went pale. Ethan's jaw tightened. That might be a cute detail to some of you, but it stops being cute when I show you this. I walked over to the side table where I had placed the folder earlier, next to a vase of lilies. My hand didn't shake when I picked it up. I opened it and pulled out a plastic sleeve with the deed and a few key emails. I handed the first copy to the bank representative. This is a copy of the deed, I said. Owner of record, Maya. My full name. No joint tenancy, no co-owner, just me. She took it and scanned the highlighted sections. Her brows knit together. I handed another copy to one of Ethan's main investors, a man who had slapped him on the back minutes before. That is the original purchase agreement, I said. You'll see the trust reference and the language structuring it as my separate property. You might also be interested in the email thread where your bank has been asking for the owner's consent to refinance, and the only signature they have so far is his, on a line that doesn't belong to him. A low murmur went through the room, sharper this time. The string quartet, sensing something, had stopped playing completely. Ethan let out a short, strained laugh. Okay, babe, very funny. You've made your point, all right? We both live here. I take care of everything. We don't need to bore everyone with legal technicalities. They trust me. He looked around for support. This time, he didn't get the quick nods he was used to. The bank representative lifted her eyes from the deed. She said, actually, this isn't a technicality, Mr. his last name. If the property is solely in your wife's name and you've been presenting it as your personal asset to secure financing, that is a serious issue. Ethan's smile froze. He said, we're married, what's hers is mine. It's all family. The paperwork just made more sense that way at the time. That's not how collateral works, she replied. Her voice was polite but firm. We need the legal owner's consent. And we also need accurate representations in all documentation and conversations. If there has been any misrepresentation, intentional or not, that affects our assessment. The investor holding the emails looked up too, his face less friendly than before. You told us this place was yours free and clear. You called it the anchor of the fund. You didn't say it was in your wife's name alone or tied to a trust fund. Ethan's eyes darted between them, then landed on me. Anger flashed across his face, then vanished behind a mask of hurt. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice low. Are you trying to sabotage me? To embarrass me in front of everyone I brought into our home? I met his gaze steadily. I'm not sabotaging you. I'm correcting the story. You brought them here to stand in a house you told them you owned. You used this place as proof you could be trusted with their money. Meanwhile, you've been threatening to throw me out of your house, telling me I'd leave with nothing while trying to use something that never belonged to you as a safety net for your risks. I let the next part come slowly, so each word could land. He has called me decoration, I said, looking at the women in the room. In front of guests, on camera. He has said that if I forget my place, he can swap me out like furniture. He has canceled transfers to my family while buying himself luxury watches. He has told me I don't need to know where the money is because rich men don't explain money to their wives. His mother's mouth dropped open. Maya, she hissed. This is private family business. You have no right to. No, I said, gently but firmly, turning toward her. He gave up the right to keep this private when he turned our life into content and bragging points. When he put my face and this penthouse on the internet to build his brand, he made it everyone's business. I'm just filling in the parts he left out.
I turned back to the bank representative and the investors. I'm not here to ruin anyone's deals. I'm here to protect what is legally mine and make sure no one signs anything under false impressions. I've consulted a lawyer. As of this afternoon, a formal notice has been sent to the building and to your bank stating that I do not consent to any refinancing or sale of this unit. Any attempt to use it as collateral without my express written approval will be challenged.
A heavy silence fell. You could hear the ice settling in the buckets. The bank representative cleared her throat. "In that case," she said, closing the folder and handing it back, "we will need to pause any pending arrangements related to this property, and we'll need to review all communications up to this point." One of the investors turned to Ethan. "Have you been using other assets like this too?" he asked, presenting them one way and having the paperwork say something else. "I haven't lied," he protested, his voice cracking slightly. "I just simplified the story. It's a house. We live in it. Of course it's mine." "Shared on social media, maybe," I said quietly. "Not on paper." A few people actually exhaled at that. They'd heard his "my house" line too many times not to understand the weight of those words. I glanced toward the back of the room, where Rafi stood near the elevator with 2 building security staff. They wore neutral expressions, but their attention was on us. "For the record," I added, projecting my voice just a little more, "the building manager is here and can confirm what I've said about ownership and recent attempts to use this property without my consent." Dozens of eyes turned to Ruffy. He didn't flinch. "As far as the building is concerned," he said evenly, "the owner of record for this unit is Ms. Maya, my full name. All recent inquiries regarding refinancing or sale have required her signature, which we have not received. We are aware of attempts by Mr., his last name, to move things forward, and we have flagged the account per the owner's instructions. If Ethan could have sunk through the floor, he would have. He tried to salvage it one last time. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice taking on that tone he used when arguing online. "You're making me look like a thief in my own home after everything I've done for you, after the life I gave you. This is how you repay me, by tearing me down in front of everyone? You're the one who built your reputation on a house you never bothered to read the deed for," I said softly. "I didn't create this moment. I just decided not to be silent in it." I took a breath and delivered the part I knew would change things in a very practical way. "And just so everyone here understands where this is heading, I want you to know that I have formally revoked Ethan's authorization on all building accounts and access related to this unit. Effective as of this afternoon, he is no longer an authorized party for owner decisions that has been updated in the system." I nodded slightly toward the security team, who straightened. "For tonight," I added, "he is, of course, welcome as my guest." The word guest echoed in the air. For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan looked small in that huge room. The suit, the watch, the city behind him, none of it covered the panic in his eyes as he realized the ground underneath him had shifted. His phone started buzzing on the coffee table. A message. Another. Probably notifications from his banking app or from someone at the bank who just received Christina's notice. He didn't reach for it. I let the silence sit for a moment, then lowered the microphone. "I think that's enough about assets for one night." I turned away from him and walked toward the balcony. The city lights opened up before me. Behind me, people began to murmur again. But the sound was different now. Less adoring, more cautious, curious. Some of the women in the room looked at me with something like pride in their eyes. Whatever story Ethan thought he was going to tell that night, it wasn't the one that ended up being recorded. The fallout started before the last guest even made it to the elevator. As soon as my little speech was over, you could feel the room fracture.
Conversations broke into small clusters. Some people moved toward me, some toward the bank representative, a few toward the door. One investor clapped Ethan on the shoulder, but it was not the same friendly slap as before. "Let's talk next week," he said with a tight smile. "We need to understand the real picture." The bank representative shook my hand. "Thank you for the clarification," she said. "We'll be in touch. Directly." She did not look at Ethan. His mother marched over, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. "How dare you?" she hissed at me. "How dare you embarrass my son like that? Family matters should stay in the family. You have always been ungrateful, but this—" "With respect," I said softly, "your son made our life very public. He has been using this house and my face to boost his image for years. He did not think twice about using private moments as content when it made him look like a hero. I'm just telling the parts he left out." "You could ruin him," she snapped. "I didn't lie," I replied. "If the truth ruins him, that's not my fault." She glared at me for a moment, then grabbed her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You will regret this." And she swept toward the elevator. "Maybe," I murmured. "But I already regret staying silent as long as I did." After that, there were fewer speeches and more quiet exits. Investors slipped away, murmuring words like due diligence and misrepresentation under their breath. Influencers pretended to be checking their cameras, but were clearly texting in group chats. I didn't chase anyone. I didn't try to fix his image. I'd done enough of that already.
In the days and weeks after the party, Ethan's online world started to crack. Partnerships he had talked about as done deals suddenly went quiet. Sponsored posts didn't appear. One brand that had featured our penthouse in their ads quietly scrubbed the images from their page. On my phone, people started sending me things. Small clips from other people's stories, screenshots. Someone had taken my little speech and spliced it next to an old video of Ethan saying, "This is my house. Everything in it is mine." On one side of the screen, he pointed at the view saying, "My house, my rules." On the other, the property records with my name on them scrolled past. The comments under those posts were a mix. Wow, he really lied for clout. So the house he flaunted wasn't even his? She saved herself. Good for her. She's a snake. She used him. I stopped reading too many at once. The internet could eat its own tail all day. I knew the real work was in the offline world now. With Christina's help, I filed to formally separate our finances. We made sure the penthouse was solidly documented as my individual property, not for negotiation as marital asset. We compiled the notes and recordings of his threats, the screenshots of him cutting off money, the evidence of his attempts to use my property behind my back. If he decides to fight dirty, Christina said, we're ready. But honestly, with what we have and the way this is structured, he's going to have a hard time convincing anyone that he's entitled to this unit. When the time was right, I told him. We sat at the kitchen island, the same place he had tapped my nose and told me to worry about Pilates instead of mortgages. I've filed to separate our finances, I said, sliding a copy of the legal notice toward him. The penthouse remains my separate property. You cannot use it for your deals. You cannot promise it to anyone. You cannot throw me out of it. He stared at the paper, his face going red. You think you can cut me out of my own house? He growled. It's not your house, I said calmly. That's the whole point. He stood up so suddenly his chair scraped across the floor. I made you. Without me, you'd still be in some little box with thrift store furniture. Maybe, but at least the thrift store furniture would be honestly mine. That night, he didn't come home. The next day, I gave him a deadline. With Christina's guidance, I drafted a formal notice giving him 30 days to move out. It was not dramatic. It was not cruel. It simply stated that as the sole owner, I was terminating his right to reside in the unit past that date. He would be considered a guest, and his building access would be adjusted accordingly.
Rafi and the building security team received copies. On the day the deadline arrived, Ethan showed up with 2 friends and some boxes, like he was the victim of an unfair eviction. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. We can fix this. You're really gonna kick me out and keep the house? Kick me out, keep the house is exactly what you've been threatening to do to me for years, I said quietly. I'm just reversing the roles, with one important difference. I'm doing it with the law on my side. He tried one last tactic at the door. He stood there, half in, half out, his boxes at his feet. You'll miss me. You'll get lonely in this big place. Nobody will film you. Nobody will buy you dresses. You'll just be some woman in a glass box. I thought of my mother's hands in dishwater, of my uncle's decision to put something in my name, of Rafi printing documents in a fluorescent-lit office, of Christina's calm eyes across her desk. I'd rather be some woman in a glass box, that's mine, than decoration in a life that belongs to someone else. He shook his head, gave me one last glare, and stepped into the hall. As he did, the security guard standing nearby spoke up. Sir, just a reminder, as of today, you're listed as a guest here. If you need access in the future, you'll have to be buzzed in or cleared by Miss. The word guest again. This time it came from someone in a uniform, backed by a computer system, backed by the deed. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He grabbed his suitcase handle and stalked to the elevator. The doors closed. The light above them moved down, down, down. I wasn't there for what came next in his life. I heard about it in bits and pieces. A friend sent me a link to a video of his new place. A rental on the edge of town. The walls were beige and close. The furniture looked like it came as a set from a discount store. He tried to make it look luxurious, angling the camera carefully, but you could see the difference if you knew what to look for. Another person sent me screenshots from his followers, complaining that the vibe wasn't the same, and asking why the penthouse was gone. He dodged the questions at first, then said something vague about downsizing to focus on what matters. Some people believed him, others didn't. Sponsors that used to court him moved on to fresher faces. Investors who once bragged about being in deals with him stopped mentioning his name.
My justice was not dramatic in the way movies show it. There were no sirens, no handcuffs, no shouting matches in the street. It was quieter. Legal documents filed, locks changed, access codes reset, emails sent. He lost the house he loved to show off. He lost the easy trust from partners who hated the idea of being misled. And most of all, he lost the image he'd built of himself as the man who owned everything in sight. I didn't have to destroy him. I just stopped letting him use me as a prop in his success story. In the months that followed, the penthouse softened. We didn't rip everything out or paint the walls black, but little by little, I made changes. The overly sharp, metallic art he had chosen for aesthetic went into storage. I brought out some of my own pieces, paintings I had made years ago, and new ones I started working on at the long dining table. The smell of linseed oil and acrylic paint began to mix with the usual vanilla candles. I added plants, real ones, not the fake glossy ones he'd light because they were maintenance-free. Ferns in corners, a little lemon tree by the window, a row of herbs in the kitchen. Green started to interrupt all that glass and marble. I bought a big, soft reading chair and put it in the corner of the living room near the window. Ethan always said a chair there would ruin the clean lines. I thought it might save my sanity. One quiet morning, months after he moved out, I sat in that chair with a blanket over my legs and a mug of tea in my hands. The city was waking up outside. The light was gentle, not harsh. I wore leggings and an oversized sweater. No one was filming me.
No one was telling me to smile big for the audience. The only sound was the low hum of the building and the occasional siren far below. For the first time since we had moved into that glass box, the quiet didn't feel like tension. It felt like peace. I didn't stay in the penthouse just to enjoy the view. I wanted to do something with what I'd learned. I kept thinking about other women who might be sitting in smaller apartments or bigger houses, feeling the same knot I had felt in my stomach when someone else held all the financial cards. So I called Christina. I want to help, I told her. Not as a client, as someone who's been there. We started small. A workshop at her office one evening called Know What You Sign. A handful of women showed up. Some were married, some were divorced. Some had never been married but had questions about co-signing leases and loans. I sat at the front and told my story in simpler pieces. I talked about the day the concierge called it my unit, the late-night email, the deed, the attempts to use my property as collateral, the way he'd used my house as a prop while keeping me in the dark. I also talked about the quiet power of reading contracts, of asking, whose name is actually on this? Of not being ashamed to say, I don't understand this line. Explain it. I wasn't a lawyer. I left the technical parts to Christina, but I knew how it felt to be on the other side of those documents, and sometimes that mattered just as much. Outside of the workshops, I started dabbling in art and interior design again. I took on a few clients who wanted help making their spaces feel like theirs, not just like something they copied from a magazine or a man's vision. We worked with what they already had: a chair that belonged to a grandmother, a table someone had saved up months to buy. We painted walls in colors that made them feel calm, not colors that photographed well. Sometimes I'd sit at my own table late at night, sketching a room layout for another woman while the city lights glowed beyond the glass. And I think, this is what I always wanted to do. See a space, help someone claim it. My parents came to visit again, too. This time, the visit felt different. My mother walked in, set her bag down, and didn't seem as stiff. She sat in my new reading chair and sighed happily. This is cozy, she said. Not like last time. Back then, I felt like I was in a showroom. I was scared to touch anything. I said, that's because it was all staged for his brand. Now it's just my home. My father stood by the window, looking out at the streets far below. He said, I'll never get used to this view, but I like the rug. He grinned, very soft.
We ate at the kitchen table, and he actually relaxed back in his chair, laughing about old stories from our neighborhood. Nobody talked about what I wore or whether I was lucky. They just asked if I was eating well, if I was sleeping, if I was happy. I was worried, my mother admitted one afternoon as we washed dishes together, just like we used to. I could hear something in your voice on the phone, but you kept saying you were fine. Then my niece sent me some video online of that event. She didn't have the words for a viral clip yet. I saw you standing there with your little papers, talking so calm. I thought, that's my girl. I laughed, embarrassed. I didn't feel calm inside. You looked like you did, she said. And you look like your grandmother. She hated it when people lied about money, too. Rafi came by one day to check on something with the windows. He walked in, whistled softly, and shook his head. This place feels different, he said, like it's actually breathing now. It's allowed to breathe, I replied. It doesn't have to pose for a camera anymore. He laughed. True. Oh, and for the record, you're officially my favorite landlord. We both smiled at that. It still felt strange, that word, landlord.
owner, but also right. I won't pretend that everything was suddenly healed. There were nights when I lay in bed and heard echoes of Ethan's voice in the hallway of my mind. Decoration, my house. You'd leave with nothing. Even with the papers filed and the locks changed, those words could still sting. When that happened, I would get up, walk barefoot across the cool floor, and place my palm against one of the glass walls. The city's light would glow through my fingers. I let the cold seep into my skin until my thoughts settled. Then I'd remind myself of every step I had taken. The email, the documents, the office with fluorescent lights, the courtroom papers, the locks, the workshop rooms full of women nodding as I spoke. Every square foot of that place was tied to my name now, not just in ink, but in the way I lived inside it. I wasn't a mannequin. I wasn't a backdrop. I was the person who had chosen to stay and clean the lies out of it. If there's anything I learned, it's this. Contracts don't care how loud someone brags. They don't care about speeches or live streams or captions. They care whose name is in ink. And life is a little like that too. You can let someone talk over you, drown you in their story, make you feel like a piece of furniture in a life they claim they built. Or you can quietly start pulling the documents, the facts, the truth, and step into your own light. In the end, I didn't win because I yelled louder. I won because I finally believed what the paperwork had been telling me all along. Never let a man call you just decoration in a house where your name is on the deed, and never again hand your worth to someone who only sees you as part of their furniture.